Happy New Year, everyone. This is my first video of 2022. And before we get into it, please subscribe, like, comment, agree or disagree. I want all kinds of feedback. Share, and all that good stuff that helps keep this channel alive. For my first video of 2022, I'm covering what is on the Disturbing Novels Iceberg. What novels I've read and are familiar with and covered as book to movies, which ones will be book to movie videos, which ones I think are misplaced, and of course which ones I think are missing. This is the latest Disturbing Novels Iceberg chart I found on Reddit. It has 8 tiers of general fiction, horror, true crime, and occult paranormal, as you can see by the color coding. And as you can see, to fit it in its entirety onto the screen and be able to read what's on it is impossible. So I'm breaking it down tier by tier. It also goes without saying that I have added a lot of books to my Amazon shopping list thanks to this iceberg chart. There's enough here to keep this channel going for many years. Alright, the top tier has a lot of familiar titles. Some of them I've covered already. I also see a lot of children's books on here. Now, maybe I am a little desensitized, but I was never disturbed by goosebumps. I was a little freaked out by scary stories to tell in the dark, mostly because of the illustrations and my aversion to skeletons. I read Flowers for Algernon in 8th grade and recognized it in the Lawnmower Man movie. I also read The Monkey's Paw in 7th grade English. I also read Anne Frank's Diary of a Young Girl. I do see Communion on here and wonder why Fire in the Sky isn't included. I'm also wondering why these aforementioned books are counted as equally as disturbing as Pet Sematary, It, Helter Skelter, and Silence of the Lambs. On tier 2, I see a handful of things I've covered already. I see Gerald's Game, and we need to talk about Kevin. Audition, and American Psycho is on tier 2, but I think it should be lower. It's quite nasty. Even more nasty than the 20-some-odd page short story, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. I also see Mein Kampf up there, and I wonder why tier 2. This was the Diary of a Madman, innermost thoughts of Hitler, his motivations to inflict suffering and murder upon over 6 million European Jews, right there in black and white. So why tier 2? I think it should go quite a bit lower. Alright, on tier 3, the only one I've read so far and covered here is The Girl Next Door. And it's in its right place since we're talking about a story that's based on a true story of an adult facilitating a child in her care being tortured to death by other children, including her own. I also have In Cold Blood and Bastard Out of Carolina on my list for future videos. Tier 4 starts with 120 Days in Sodom, the only one I know of at this level that's been adapted to film. The movie is on tier 3 of the Disturbing Movie Iceberg. And let's get a preview as to why. This is what the cover looks like. And I flipped to a random page and grabbed the, just a snippet of it that has the least profanities that I won't say. Alright. He used to enjoy pricking the flesh with an awl, and he now improves on this by enclosing a pregnant woman in a barrel filled with spikes. Then he has the barrel vigorously rolled around a garden. And that's just a paragraph out of all this. And without reading the whole thing yet, I will, and from what I understand from Horrible Review's coverage of 120 Days of Sodom, there was a lot of watering down going on here from book to movie, and I'll be getting to it soon. Alright. Tier 5 is where it starts to look like a lot of titles that suggest a lot of efforts for novelists to pique as much morbid curiosity as possible by being gross, with a lot of shit like Genital Grinder and The Ultimate Dead Baby Cookbook. I personally think the Sopaths is missing from this list, especially this tier. For more info as to why, please see my video titled What Might Have Been and What Better Never Be. Tier 6 is more being gross and crass in a book, except for the Necronomicon. I took a peek at that about 20 years ago, and it really is like a how-to for summoning spirits, attaching demons to people, and some of it for crafting protective incantations. So, the use of it is the disturbing part. So, I mean, you know what they say about witchcraft. Whatever you dish out, you'll get back sevenfold. So, my own little personal disclaimer is don't mess around with anything in the Necronomicon because you don't know for real what it is. I mean, it could be just something crafted by some charlatan to get a bunch of goofy emo goth kids to play around with some phony witchcraft and demonology. Or it could be real. I mean, you never know. I just personally don't want it in my house. And it's also just as much to blame for all the chaos in the Evil Dead franchise. That's where it gets its infamy from. Tier 7, we have Cursed Publications. Tamino's Howl is a Japanese poem that is kind of like Bloody Mary, or the poetic version of the video in The Ring. If you read it out loud, you invoke a curse upon your household. The Great Omar is also apparently cursed. The narrative of the life of James Allen is just a career criminal's deathbed confession, and what's mainly disturbing about it is that the original copy is bound in the guy's own skin. As for the lost Marquis de Sade manuscripts, you've seen how this dude thought on paper when I read that little bit of 120 Days in Sodom. The reason why it's available to be read is pretty interesting. It goes without saying that the Marquis de Sade was a sick and strange man, so much so that ruthless dictators from France's history, such as Napoleon Bonaparte and Robespierre, were quick to throw him in jail as soon as they took office. But the de Sade name lives on in the Marquis's several times great-grandchildren who are using the proceeds to clean up the de Sade name by putting it towards more wholesome pursuits, like gourmet food and fine wine. Alright. The two on Tier 8 are ancient books dating back as far as the 15th century. Codex Gigas is also known as the Devil's Bible. As for the Voynich manuscript, it still has yet to be really figured out, which is the disturbing part. And that is it for the Disturbing Novel Iceberg. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you back next week for World War Z.